Hi everybody. Effective marketing these days has to involve videos. Now, what exactly does that mean? There's a lot of open-ended questions here when it comes to videos. What do you create a video about? What does success look like? Is your goal for creating a video to drive more awareness for your brand or your product, or trying to sell a product? Or once you have your video, where do you even post it? What are the pros and cons of posting on, let's say, Instagram or Twitter/X, YouTube, LinkedIn, and many other platforms that are probably relevant for the kind of video you're building? To answer this and a whole lot more, both from a business point of view as well as from a technical point of view, I talked with Chris Raroque, one of the most prolific app builders that I know. He's back for round 2, actually, to continue the great conversation we had almost a year ago. So this is going to be a great conversation, so grab a drink, sit back and relax, and let's get started. All right, Chris, it's great to chat with you again. This is round 2 of you chatting about all the cool things you've been up to. I'm also joined by Pixel here, who also decides to, wants to join in and see how it's going. And, and I think Ellie is the name for your dog, correct?
Ellie is the hamster, and then Luna.
Oh, Ellie is the hamster. Luna is the okay, gotcha. I knew there was like a pet connection. All your products.
Yeah, exactly.
And for some more context, the last time you were on, we were talking about some of the apps that you were building, and you were starting to think about how do I market it? How do I get more people to build these things? Yeah. This is like, indie hacking 101 before it became indie hacking, got all the mainstream attention over the past couple of months. So you were really on the cutting edge of some of these things that we're talking about.
A little bit.
Granted. So what have you been up to?
Yeah, a lot has changed. I think the biggest thing since the last conversation, so I actually watched the last conversation to make sure, all right, what did we talk about last time? But a lot has changed. So at the time I was just working on 2 apps. So it was Mogul and Ellie. So Mogul was a personal CRM. And then I think I just really started to work on Ellie a little bit. I think maybe it was 3 or 4 months into building Ellie. And that's a daily planning app that I was building. So now what's changed is there's a 3rd app in the mix. So now I have a budgeting app that I'm working on as well. And then also 6 months ago, I started doing video content. And that has been, that one's probably the bigger update. That one has, we'll talk more about it, but that's been probably the most life-changing for me in the last few months.
Yeah, let's talk about the video content, because when you have apps that are being built and they're being showcased, there's often a disconnect between the person building it and the app itself. That human connection is often lost. Mm-hmm. Whereas in your case, you've been providing live updates in terms of features you're doing, design updates on here's what it looked like before, here's what it looks like right now, and being very personal with the audience in some ways. So kind of giving a very human element to what you are building. And the videos have been fantastic. I watched both your YouTube videos and your TikTok videos on it. So walk me through, at some point I do want to also ask about your setup and what tools you use for work. But let's go through the videos. Why did you decide to do videos? Why did you choose a format you chose? Did you try different things to see what clicked and didn't click, and all of that?
Yeah. So I originally started, and so for people who don't know, I actually started posting on Twitter. That was the main way that I would build in public and share my journey. And I actually absolutely love posting there. Originally, I did get into it just as this is how I'm going to do marketing. But I fell in love with it as just a documentation journey, a way just for me to document what I'm building, the updates. And something that I realized was there was a lot that I wanted to tweet about and say that just would not fit in a Twitter thread, or I just couldn't convey it properly. So that's why I decided to get into video. And I actually started first on TikTok because it was the least polished. It was the one where I felt like I could just talk to the camera and it felt natural to post that kind of content. I couldn't do the same on YouTube or Instagram because I felt like the standard was a little higher, so I would need to take it a little more seriously. But for TikTok, I felt like I can just record updates, just share my thoughts, kind of like I do on Twitter. So that's why I started posting there first. And that's why I started posting video in general. It was just to cover the stuff I couldn't cover on Twitter and just share a little more detailed my thoughts. And that's how it started. Then I moved from TikTok to slightly Instagram, but kind of just reposting the content. So I now, after a few months, I realized I do need to actually probably craft specific videos just for Instagram. And then after TikTok and Instagram, then I moved to YouTube, and that one was a whole different thing. But that's basically the summary of kind of why I started posting there, and then why I moved to the other networks.
What's the biggest difference between the three video platforms you've seen so far?
I think, okay, the biggest for sure is the type of engagement from the audience. So something that I thought that, if I posted a video, it would be consumed in the same way across the platforms, because it was kind of the same thing. Like my Twitter and my TikTok and Instagram videos were kind of just shorter versions of the YouTube videos I was doing, but I was completely wrong. And I realized that people consume different things, or they're in different mindsets when they're consuming content on like TikTok and Instagram versus on YouTube. For TikTok and Instagram, they're just kind of scrolling, and so they're not consciously looking for my content. It just kind of appears there, and then they're like, oh, okay, I'll just watch this quick update from Chris. On YouTube, they're consciously like, I'm gonna sit down for 10-20 minutes and go watch this long video. And I've noticed that on YouTube, the comments are just way more engaging and way more thoughtful. It's clear they watched through the entire thing. On TikTok and Instagram, the comments are usually a little bit more surface level, which is okay because the videos are like 1 minute long. So there's not much for them to ask anyway, but it's usually just general questions like, how did you get into development? Like, why did you choose this technology? On YouTube, they're very specific questions of like, what was the challenging part about implementing, recurring transaction for the budgeting app? Or, you mentioned here that, you track this for retention. Why did you do it this way? Why didn't you track this thing? And I noticed that the discussions they're just a little bit more in depth. I think that's probably the biggest difference. Also, I guess a second thing is that I noticed that I think the connection to the audience was a lot stronger with YouTube, probably because they were sitting down in a longer session. So it maybe felt like we were having more of a conversation than on, Instagram or TikTok. And so once I noticed a huge difference in the kind of people who would reach out to me. When I started tweeting, I would get some cold DMs, people saying, hey, I love your tweets, like been following along. Then I started posting on TikTok and Instagram, and I started noticing that the messages I would be getting were a little bit more like personal, like almost like they felt like they knew me. Then it just went to a whole other level when I started doing YouTube, and people started reaching out very similarly in a way that like my friends who know me, that I'm like, they know that the things that I'm building, the things that I'm going through, I felt like they actually had a really good snapshot of that. And so they would reach out as if they've known me for a long time. And so that's actually been a huge difference, I think, too, between all three platforms, just kind of the level of connection you have with the users. And that could be a good or a bad thing, but in my case, it's pretty good because I actually love it when people reach out and they feel comfortable enough to ask me questions or ask me things that they probably wouldn't have if it was just, them seeing me on Twitter.
Do you track conversions, and do you see any differences between which of the platforms also end up driving, I'm guessing, more usage to the App Store for people to try out your app?
Yeah, so I don't track conversions. I probably should, but I just actually recently started putting some trackers because I just did my first sponsorship and they were like, oh, here's our link. And I was like, oh, I should probably start also tracking my own links and see like if people are clicking them. But I do believe that there is actually a way higher conversion rate for YouTube than the other platforms. And the reason I think that, I don't have the data to back it up, but I did notice like I put out a wait list for the budgeting app when I was first starting. And I thought if I put this wait list out, and it was just in 4 videos, maybe I would get 50 signups like max over those 4 videos. And I was absolutely floored by how many people actually filled out and signed up just on 4 videos. And again, these were the developers, so they were really in the market for a budgeting app. I thought maybe max 50 of these developers would actually like care or would just be curious enough to download it. But out of that, there were, I think over the span of 4 videos, I got around 3,000 signups to the waitlist. And when I saw that, I was like, I've never gotten anything like that on Twitter. Like when I posted the same sign up form on Twitter, I think max I got over the course of like a ton of tweets was maybe like 100 signups total from that. And so I think it is I definitely think that the conversion is much higher on the long form content. Again, just because people are in the mindset, they're like fully focused on the video, they're consciously choosing to go watch it, versus on Twitter or TikTok or Instagram where they're scrolling and you're one of like 100 videos they're about to see in that next hour. And so the chance of actually them stopping and going to the profile and converting is probably a lot lower. So I don't have the data to back it up, but I do believe the conversion rate is substantially higher on YouTube.
No, that tracks my own personal experience as well, because I post content I wrote a book on algorithms recently, which is like not my normal audience kind of, cup of tea. And so there's been a, bit of like an uphill battle trying to get people to view it. And I have seen the same thing where I have a call to action to like learn more about the book itself. Far greater engagement on YouTube than on TikTok and Instagram and even Twitter in some cases. But unlike you though, what I haven't done is actually create new content for each of those platforms. Like what I basically do is that I have a split screen setup where one half of the screen in landscape is my slides. The other half is a video of me. Yeah. And then for TikTok, I basically just take each half, move it to the top on top of each other, and I post the exact same content because it just saves time from having to re-record it. Probably not the best way of doing things, but I've definitely found that YouTube still with that happens to be the best place for being able to see all of this. And in your case, is your call to action at the beginning of the video, middle of the video, or towards the end?
So I've done it. I honestly, when I did the videos, I didn't even really like think of the call to action, or I didn't try to insert it. But so when I went back and rewatched the videos, because I finally did a video with an actual call to action. Again, like I just did my first sponsored video. So that one I actually had to consciously figure out where am I going to talk about, go sign up for the sponsor. So I went back to my old videos to check, did I subconsciously add a call to action? And I realized that I think subconsciously I did naturally kind of add like little mini call to actions where they weren't directly saying, hey, go sign up for the wait list, but it was kind of like almost like hey, I have a wait list. It's, this is the analytics. Like, look how many people signed up. So technically I didn't say, hey, there's a wait list, go sign up, but I kind of hinted like, by talking about the analytics of the waitlist, people were like, oh, there's a waitlist. It's probably in the description. And I think in 3 of the videos, I didn't even say that the link was in the description. I just said, I actually didn't say anything. I just said like, here's the analytics for the waitlist, or here's how the app's going. Waitlist signups have gone up. And I think people naturally took that as a call to action, like a subtle one, and then kind of went down to the section. Now I'm a little bit more conscious about trying to add some call to actions, because once I did add an actual call to action on the 4th video, I think the first 3 videos got total 1,000 signups for the first 3. Then I put a direct call to action on the 4th. That one got 2,000 signups alone. So it basically doubled the combination of the first 3. So I do think call to actions, like direct ones, they do matter. And the way that I did it for the 4th one was actually probably more in the middle. So more in the middle. So lots of context, similar to how I did it for the first 3, where it's kind of subtle. And then kind of towards the middle, maybe a little bit towards the endish too. Then I would say, by the way, like if you're interested, there is a waitlist here. And it's already been built up so hard. So I could just mention it for maybe like 2 seconds, and that would probably be enough. But that's how I've been doing the recent call to actions for the last like 3 videos.
That makes sense, because in YouTube you get to see exactly where your average visitor is highly engaged and where they drop off as time goes on. And my guess has always been that if you put at the very beginning, people aren't really convinced about why should I care? Like, here I am here to learn something very specific, and I don't have access to the knowledge that makes me trust you enough to go do all these call to action. But the midpoint, if they're still watching the video, it means they see some value there. It's like, okay, I'm sort of convinced here. So there's probably a high likelihood of them going and doing whatever you're asking them to do. And they made it all the way to the end, especially in like longer videos. That means they've committed. They really like what they saw. So there's a very good chance of converting. So that tracks really well with it. And the interesting thing is also that both you and I do tend to target developers in terms of how this goes. I at some point, be curious to get data from wherever I can on how do consumer apps or non-developer facing content, there's a behavior change for some of that as well.
Yeah, I'm also curious about that too. I'm honestly I think since even though technically my stuff is consumer, it's B2C, but then the audience is developers, I'm actually not even sure the answer, because I feel like I've mixed the two so closely that everything that I thought would happen has basically not happened. Like the reverse has happened. I thought oh, there's no audience overlap with this B2C app and the developers. I'm just going to build in public and I don't even care about the conversions or anything. And then there's a ton of conversions, like way more than I thought. And so I actually now with confidence can't really answer anything anymore. But I also do want to talk to some people and see if, how it works for like non-developer audiences.
Do you customize the content for the audience, or do you customize it more for yourself? You're thinking that I would be interested in this kind of content if I were to watch it from somewhere else. So I'm going to create that same kind of content that resonates to me personally. If people like it, great. If they don't, well, we'll revisit at that point.
Yeah, 100% the second one. So I primarily make the content for myself. Like basically, here's the stuff that I genuinely wish I had when I was starting out doing software development. Another reason that I do it is because I get a lot of the same questions, like in my DMs of, hey, how do you get started? Or, hey, how did you integrated this, you integrated Slack. How did you do this? I'm kind of curious. And a lot of the times I just kind of craft a message to say, oh yeah, you should go to the docs, do this. But then sometimes I'm like, I should have just recorded it and then so I can send it to them. And then sometimes I also I do really wish I can go back in time and kind of watch, hey, I was integrating Outlook. That seemed really painful. Was it that bad? And then I can go watch the video and kind of see it again. So I do create content primarily for myself to just play it back, to be able to send to people. And again, just almost like a message to my younger self to be able to have, because I know that will 100% be helpful to other people. But I do recently, though, I have been a little bit more conscious about what would other people like. So I still do keep myself as the primary audience, or like my past self as the primary audience, but I do have a hint of like, okay, but I will deviate a little bit if I know it can help a more general audience, even if it's not as much for me. But yeah, it's the same strategy, I think, with my Twitter as well. Before I used to create content specifically just for audiences on Twitter, and I got burnt out so easily there. Once I started treating it just as a journal, and I was like, I don't even care if anyone likes this stuff. Like, this is the primary purpose is for me to just play back everything, which I do all the time. Because sometimes I'm like, sometimes I'm hard on myself and I'm like, oh, I feel like I didn't get a lot done this month. And then I can just scroll back and be like, oh, I forgot I shipped these 4 things. Never mind. I actually did a great job. And so I treat Twitter as a journal. So the engagement doesn't really matter as much to me. The follower count doesn't matter. YouTube, maybe like 80% of that. And then 20% is like, I do want it to be educational and help people. So I do consider the audience.
In aggregate, you're still in the open. People can see you. And I think that moves the needle forward in whatever direction it's going. Maybe the angle might be off a little bit here and there, but as long as you're creating content and creating this mind share amongst all the audiences that you're targeting, that probably goes a long way.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Let's talk about your design of the thumbnails and the style you have as well, because it's very polished and very deliberate in how the typography you use, which oftentimes mimics the typography logo, I think, in some cases, the captioning and so on. So what got you interested in like actually not what interested, you already told me that. What things did you try out to land on the current style that you're in right now?
Yeah, in terms of so I guess in terms of the style of like the video and the thumbnails, just like everything, I did try out a bunch of different things. So, and I do attribute it a lot to the early TikTok and the Instagram stuff that I was doing. That definitely had an impact on the YouTube stuff. When I did the Instagram and TikTok stuff, it was really more just similar to the Twitter. It was just, here's the update, here's the 4 things that I did in the day, like this is what it is. And I think a lot of the comments were asking questions. They were still super, like very, very superficial, I guess, like surface level questions where it's like, it has nothing to do with the content. It's more like, how did you get started? Or like, can you talk about integrations? The video had nothing to do with integrations, but I think when I saw the comments, it did start getting me more inspired to shift the content a little bit more towards not just documenting, but slightly educational to try to help people. And so the early videos I did were actually leaning way more towards documentation. And so you can see, I even documented like making coffee, like the typical stuff you see in like a vlog. And then I started shifting maybe like 4 or 5 videos in. You might notice there's a shift of, there's really no more angles of me typing and coding. I'm not making coffee anymore. It's just me sitting in front of the camera and talking for like 12 minutes. And I think it's because I started noticing the shift in comments like really like kind of lean more towards educational, and to be able to, I actually genuinely wanted to answer those questions, and I think the only way for me to do it was to kind of cut out some of the stuff I was doing in the vlog type style, and then just really sit down the camera and go answer those questions in the most concise way as possible. And so that's, I think, a huge reason why the entire aesthetic and the type of video that I do has shifted. It's because the stuff I'm seeing from people and the kind of questions really did shape, I do want to be helpful. It made me realize I did want to do more, like lean more in the educational space and start doing this type of thing. It's still a challenge though, because I do want to make it interesting. So sometimes I do embed like some vlog content, and it's been a while. I think I've been on a streak of like 4 educational content. And so the next one, I'm purposely really going to try to make this one more like semi-entertaining document, because I genuinely want that. Like those are probably my favorite videos to make, is the vlog style one, just because that's the most fun when I get to look back at those type of videos. So I'm going to try to do another one of those. But yeah, that's kind of why my content has been leaning more towards educational, and it is the way that it is. It's just because that's the kind of content that I wanted to put out there after seeing some of the comments.
Makes sense. And I think it's a good tie-in where the people who are watching for educational content might also be interested in your call to action as well, as opposed to like a random passerby who's wondering about something completely unrelated and stumbles upon what you're creating.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, now let's geek out on technical details
about
the videos itself. What camera do you use for the recordings?
Yeah, so when I first did the TikTok and Instagram, I actually set as a constraint for myself and said, I'm not going to use any camera. I'm just going to use a phone and like the wired Apple mic. That's the only thing I'm going to use, because I did attempt video content a long time ago in the past. And when I started thinking about what software am I going to use, what camera, I got really overwhelmed and started overthinking it. So that's what I did for the Instagram, TikTok stuff. For the YouTube though, I realized, okay, the camera quality, as good as it is, it probably won't cut it, especially for the audio portion. Like I realized I needed a mic. So the things that I use are, actually I have it here. So this is the DJI Pocket 3. So this is what I use to shoot all of the YouTube stuff. And actually a lot of maybe like the last 10 Instagram, TikTok stuff has also been on here, where I kind of, because it can shoot in vertical and landscape and portrait. Yeah. Horizontal. It can shoot in like basically any of those. So this has been huge. It's also very compact. So when I do some of the vlogging stuff, which some of my early YouTube videos and some of the upcoming ones are going to be, it's so easy to take this thing around and just shoot with it. And then I use the DJI mic too, that's just clipped here for the audio. And I thought it would not make a big difference. I was like, oh, I can just use the mic that comes on here and just it'll just pick up the sound. I was very surprised that it actually made a big difference in the audio. And then I also realized it made a big difference just holding it versus clipping it. So clipping it has been like the most consistent for audio. So those are the two things that I use. And then I edit everything in CapCut on desktop. So that's what I use for editing. But yeah, very, very simple for a YouTuber. But my content's pretty simple. It's like just me staring at a camera. So that's what I use.
But you also add animated GIFs every now and then to highlight various parts of it. I can see screenshots of your app as well. Does CapCut do all of those things also?
Yes, yeah. So they make it really easy to just drag things in. I've had to get very creative. So like I do a lot of my own screen recording and then just drag it in. And then very thankfully, it does support GIFs. So it actually did take me a little bit of time to find an editor that would allow that, because usually it just is static like an image. But yeah, it's very, very simple. I originally actually tried to use, I think, DaVinci Resolve. And then there was another one. I forgot what it is.
Is it Camtasia?
No. It's, I don't think it was After Effects. I don't think. But there was something else I was using, and I noticed that I had way more control, but for some reason, because I was using CapCut on the phone to edit the TikToks and Instagram, I noticed like I was just spending so much time editing compared to shooting when I was doing my TikTok and Instagram videos. So I was like, oh, maybe I should try it on desktop, and let me just see if, yes, I'll have like 1/8 of the power, but let me see if this actually like speeds up my workflow. I also don't know anything about color grading or anything, so I don't even use most of the stuff that I probably should be using. So CapCut's made that like super easy, and it's it's been I'm like surprised how far you can push it and how like complicated the software actually is.
Your captions. What tool do you use for the captioning?
So I use okay. So for TikTok and Instagram, I actually use the for the short form. I use TikTok's built-in auto captioner for some reason. So yeah, what I do is I export it, put it in TikTok, and then re-export it again out of TikTok sometimes, because for some reason they just have the best auto captioner that I have found, and I think TikTok might own CapCut too, but I got better results actually just doing it off TikTok. That only works for the short form videos though, so that's what I do for the auto captioning. The long form, to be honest, I haven't. I think I've just been doing some manual captions here and there where I've been manually typing it. So tedious that I rarely do it anymore. But I actually have not found a really good auto captioner yet. If you have recommendations, please let me.
Yeah, actually I do. I was kind of curious because I was hoping you had an easier one, which is where
okay,
I get to. I use Adobe Premiere for auto captioning.
Okay.
So I do all my recording in Camtasia, which is similar to CapCut in many ways, because I don't want to spend time doing all of the video editing, color grading. Like, I don't even know what that even means. So I'll just be sliding, things back and forth, saying like, oh, this looks good. It probably looks like garbage to people who know what they're talking about here. So I don't bother with any of that. And so all my recording and exporting happens in Camtasia. So the full video is done in Camtasia. Then I import that video into Premiere. Premiere, much like After Effects, is a complicated tool. It does everything. It's for like professional filmmakers and so on. The only thing I use Premiere for is the auto captioning, where it actually scans your audio, creates automatic captions, and then you have the typical Adobe style level of fidelity in formatting the font, placement of the captions themselves. And once I have my caption, I then export the video from there. So I don't use Premiere for anything else except the captioning. And because I record both I export both in vertical format and in horizontal format, I create two encodings essentially in Premiere, and the same captions. I export the caption file from one of them, and then I import it when I'm doing the other version of it, just so I don't have to go back and modify it, because I speak pretty quickly in some of my videos, and so the auto captioning almost always gets stuff wrong. So I spend about probably for a 10-minute video, probably about 10 minutes actually going and make sure the captions are reasonably accurate. They're in 2 lines as opposed to 3 lines in some cases, and those kind of little tweaks. And so yeah, that's been my workflow so far.
I gotta check this out. Let me go. I'm gonna go check this out after that too, and then I'm gonna recheck CapCut's auto captioning too, because it's been like a year since I looked, so maybe it's actually improved like a lot. So, but that's that I do need to re-add captions. Have been, I remember for TikTok and Instagram, when I switched to doing captions, I did notice just a way higher retention rate, I think, because a lot of people do watch it sometimes without volume, or they do watch it like with very low volume, or they're not really paying attention that well. So then having the captions really improves that, just their ability to focus on the video. So I think it's very worth it. I'll double check. I need to re-add it to my YouTube videos for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I need to check out CapCut's auto captioning as well, because both Camtasia and CapCut, they have auto captioning. And I can tell you about the Camtasia auto captioning. It does a decent job, but it doesn't make it easy for you to edit the captions after it's been generated. So if it gets it right the first time, you're golden. Everything is great. In my case, it never gets it right. Mostly it's a lesson to me that I should probably speak more clearly and slowly. But when I get excited, I'm just blurting out stuff, at like lightning speed, which, I get it. It's not great. And so, but Premiere does a great job in that though, because you literally see empty text fields where the caption is and the timestamp for it. And it's a free-form text field. You can go and just type in exactly what it's supposed to be. It updates the visuals accordingly as well. And yeah, there's a learning curve, of course, for Premiere. But I watched a video on YouTube actually on how do I do captioning in Premiere. There's some various steps involved. I don't know what they do, and which is terrible, because I always prided myself on learning more about the tools I'm using so I can be better at it. But this is one of those cases where I'm like a typical consumer, where I don't really need to know why it's being done, all these things. I'm just going to memorize these steps. I'm going to convert from caption to graphic, because if I don't do that, it doesn't actually export it, as a caption when I do the video. But it's probably a better reason for that. I don't know what that is. And so it's actually been really fun in some ways, exploring this, because for me, I don't want my tombstone to ever read was an expert in video editing. Rather than be created content would be my tombstone reads. So for me, I really treat this as a way typical developers probably ask you questions about. You're like surface level questions on,
Yeah,
if they spent maybe 5 minutes digging into documentation to understand it. That's exactly how I treat this whole captioning and video editing story, is that I don't want to know more about this because this is the last thing in my life that I want to spend time and dive into. I think it's the bare minimum needed to get my videos out with reasonable quality.
Yeah, I think I'm exactly the same way. So, which is probably why I haven't like found the solution yet. Because for everything else, for development, I'll go down a rabbit hole to figure it out, but not this. Like I think that, and I think there's like a couple things in video content where people just do not want to focus time on, and for sure captions. And then I think it's like when you're done editing a video, it's like titling it and thumbnail. Like people just don't want to do it at the time because they just spend all their energy actually making the content. So it makes sense why this is like a more like overlooked area or something that people don't want to get into.
Have you tried YouTube Shorts?
I did. I actually did cross post a little bit one side because I think I didn't realize that you could just like upload to YouTube Shorts, and I didn't realize that it was just basically like free views. So when I was doing the short form, I was cross posting everything to YouTube Shorts. I think towards the end of me doing stuff on TikTok and Instagram, I was surprised that I did get some views. What was actually more surprising is that these shorts, which I haven't posted in like 2 or 3 months, because of the long form content I'm doing, the short forms are actually getting views and getting recommended, which has been super interesting. But yeah, I haven't made anything specifically for YouTube Shorts. Something I really wasn't a fan of too was I think the limit is maybe 90 seconds for the short.
I think it's 1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute. Okay, so that was even worse. I think maybe Instagram was 90 seconds. So TikTok, I was able to go for up to I think 3 minutes for the video, and then I remember exporting some of the videos to Instagram. Then they got chopped off, and I was like, oh, that's not good. And then I did YouTube, and then YouTube Shorts chopped it up even more. So I just started treating YouTube Shorts as a funnel to the Instagram and TikTok. So I just started saying towards the end, full video in TikTok, Instagram. And some people got kind of mad at that. They were like, why don't you post the full thing? And I'm like, I physically cannot post the full thing. That's why I would love to post the full thing. So that's why I also stopped kind of doing the YouTube Shorts. And I don't know if I'll make specific content for it, just because that 1 minute cap is pretty hard for me to work with, especially after doing YouTube, where I'm now used to at least like 10 minutes. It's a little more challenging.
Exactly my reason as well, because that 1 minute time frame is just not enough to convey what you really want to do. And if your goal is to repurpose the content as much as you can, you have to do a whole new thing only for one particular platform.
Yeah.
I think TikTok now lets you go up to 60 minutes.
Wow.
Videos.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Wow. That's massive. Okay.
Yeah, which is huge because, my tutorial content oftentimes goes into 10, 15, sometimes 20, 30 minutes, depending on what I'm talking about. And that just makes it so much easier to just be able to upload there. And I did try YouTube Shorts for a few videos being like introductory topics, like, oh, by the way, to learn more, go larger one, just like you did. And same exact feedback is like, why are you wasting my time with a teaser for, it's not even a product. It's like, it's an educational kind of tutorial thing, which is very different as well. So like the call to action is really not go check out anything else. It's really just watch the larger video in these other places.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people aren't aware of that cutoff, and they think we're just trying to like kind of just funnel it or try to get more views to the other stuff. But yeah, it's I don't know if they'll ever raise it. They probably won't, because maybe it'll cannibalize like actual YouTube content potentially. But when I was doing it though, it was nice to just have that other outlet, and I did get some subscribers and some initial views on the video when I was posting the short form content. It did funnel some views to the long form content.
And definitely as a consumer of YouTube Shorts, every now and then when I'm just like scrolling through things, the YouTube Short being 1 minute definitely gets you an upper bound on like where the punchline is going to be very, very quickly. Like I love stand-up comedy, and so a lot of my things on my YouTube Shorts and on TikTok are stand-up comedy related. And with TikTok, I'm like, okay, it's going to be like a 5 minute thing before we get the punchline. Whereas in YouTube Shorts, it's like I know exactly the setup's going to be here and it's going to end right here, which is a different kind of content as well in terms of it.
It is. Yeah. I think with that constraint, which I think goes back to the thing we were originally talking about too, was repurposing content or creating for the platform. I feel like that time constraint, it really does change the nature of the content more than people realize, and which is why I had to stop really posting on Instagram too, and I realized I need to make specific content for this, like even for the medium, not just the time constraint there, but just the tooling that they put around it and like where it's going to be displayed. I feel like really does impact just the type of content. And so for stand-up, they have to like maybe even rewrite the entire thing to make it work in that time constraint.
Yeah, I've definitely seen cases where they chopped off the middle completely, where it's like more setup or more context, and just went straight to the end of it. And if you follow some of these jokes, you're like, oh, they trimmed a large amount of it just to make it work.
Yeah.
So thumbnails, your thumbnail design, what was the inspiration behind the style you use right now?
Yeah, I think right now the style is just kind of me sitting in front, and then usually some text that kind of shows like what the video is going to be about, and then I started posting the icon and maybe like a screenshot or something on like the top right of the thumbnail. To be honest, I think when I did it the first time, it was just because I didn't really like make a thumbnail specifically for it. And so I just wanted to screen capture something from the video. But the only thing that made sense was just me sitting in front of the camera, because I think it was a video of me just sitting in front of the camera for like 12 minutes. And once I did that, I was kind of surprised that no one complained about it, or like, and it actually did get views. So I was like, okay, maybe this isn't too bad. I started to continue and build off of that just because I don't know if this is correct, but I feel like the audience is kind of familiar with it. So when they see a thumbnail, I guess almost like you can think of like a Mr. Beast thumbnail or something. There's like a specific style and aesthetic where if it looks like even remotely, you have his face and something in the background, you'll know, oh, that's one of his videos. I should go click it. And I think I accidentally kind of picked that up a little bit, where because I did like 2 or 3 videos in that format, then I kind of like stuck with it and just made like minor modifications. And I used to kind of be like, oh, why do some YouTubers keep repeating the same thumbnails? I now understand. Like, I think like, because I've accidentally kind of done that, but I do still like the aesthetic, and I do still like the thumbnail style where it's kind of just me so that they know, okay, this is going to be a talking video. Like, I also don't want to like really bait anyone into thinking, oh, this is going to be a day in the life type content. No, this is going to be me sitting in front of a camera for 12 minutes straight. So please be prepared and don't click this video if like that's not going to be interesting to you. So I did want to keep it realistic for what it is. And then I did want the focus to be more like about the text and maybe like whatever graphic is accompanying it. That's what I really wanted the focus to be. So that's kind of why I laid it out like that. And then I put the icon of whatever app I'm talking about in the corner, so that way when people are going back and looking, they know which app I'm talking about, because my content's a little different where for most people, they have one topic that they're covering, or if they're building an app, they have one app that they're building. So when you go to, there's another YouTuber, I think his name is Jacob Sucks at Coding, and he talks about his product, but every video is going to be about that product. Mine's a little different because some people came and watched it because of Ellie, and then some watched it because of Luna, and then some watched it just there's like some generic content that I write, but most of the time they're focused on one or the other. And so I needed that app icon so that way when you're scrolling through my channel, you can quickly be like, oh, this is a Luna video, or oh, this is an Ellie video. Hopefully that came across like when you look at the icons so people get familiar with the logo, but that was the intention for sure.
Oh, that's very clever, because that's right. It's almost like a Venn diagram. You have one for app A, another one for app B, and some of the intersection might be more of your general vlog content of just like building in public. And so how do you make sure that people who are watching one or the other don't get, like baited into seeing the wrong content? That's actually a really good idea.
Right. Yeah. So that was the intention. So hopefully it came across that way. I know YouTube does have playlists, and so I have playlists for the specific things, and I used to put it in the title as well, but I realized no one goes that far into the title, like when it's right at the end, because it gets cut off like on YouTube. And people, like, since people wouldn't have seen that, I was like, I think the best place for me to do it is probably in the thumbnail.
Speaking of titles, do you do any optimization of the titles, like what words work and don't work?
Originally I didn't, but now I'm starting to be a little bit more conscious of it. So right now what I'm doing honestly is kind of like, I test like a couple of different titles. And so I throw it into ChatGPT or Claude or something, and I just kind of ask, hey, what do you think of this title? And I've actually been surprised that it's told me like, oh, I'm not sure what this is, or it's not clear enough. Or it gives me suggestions and says, here's another variation. And it's been like sometimes I see a variation it spits out and I'm like, oh, I would actually click that one probably more. Or, oh, as someone who has no context, this one actually, you're right, this one does make more sense to me. So I don't really I guess I don't really A/B test like that, but I do test out a bunch of thumbnail or a bunch of titles, and I use tools like Claude or GPT just to like go back and forth and try to kind of, because when you're the one that's coming up with the titles, it's kind of hard to put yourself in someone's shoes that does not have any context. But if Claude is spitting out thumbnails to you, so much easier for you to look at it with fresh eyes because you're not the one who thought about it. So that's kind of my process right now with the titles.
In YouTube, they also have the actual, speaking of A/B testing, for thumbnails, you have the option now of like being able to choose two thumbnails, and it'll dynamically pick the one that ends up giving the best results. Have you tried that?
Yes, I do it now for every single video, just out of like curiosity to see like is something happening. Most of the time, they perform very, very similarly.
Yeah.
That's what I've noticed. But sometimes there are like maybe there's at least like one, I guess not a winner, but there's always one that's like a loser, basically. That's like, oh, this one's not performing as well. So at least I know which one isn't. And so this has also been great for me to kind of get out of the comfort zone and test slightly different thumbnails, because a lot of them are the same format. And then one of the things I wanted to test was, what if I put a graphic in there? Will that mess things up? Will that make things better? And it turns out it did actually perform a little bit better than the ones without the graphic. So then I started adding, some sort of accompanying graphic, like a chart or like a $sign or something that kind of helps with the title of the video. But if the A/B test was not there, I probably wouldn't have had the courage to go and do that myself and kind of deviate. So I'm really glad that they launched that.
Yeah, I'd be curious if they extend it to other fields as well, like your title and maybe even description, just to see what gives better results. I also noticed that you use hashtags to show like the 3 gray boxes next to it. Have you seen that mattering much?
To be honest, I don't know if it's mattered, but I just saw a bunch of other YouTubers do it. So I was like, okay, they probably thought through this more than I did. If they're doing it, there's probably something there. I heard that it doesn't matter a lot, but like anecdotally, people are like, no, it is good though, because then even if someone like scans it, that sometimes helps a little bit where they're in that mindset. And something I realized too is I'm really, really big on trying to give people as much context as possible, like early on in the video or before, so that they don't waste their time or they don't even start the video unless this is something I'm interested in. So that's why I also don't like to bait anyone in the thumbnail or the title or do anything clickbait, because I know that'll just, the retention will take a nosedive if that happens. And I'm hoping that maybe some stuff maybe those hashtags will also help YouTube identify which audience actually like wants to view this type of content. But I'm honestly not sure if it actually does anything.
Yeah, and I really like how you do it. And it's something I'm going to steal some of my videos. You start off by explaining the exact topic that this video is going to be about. And towards like maybe let's say the 30 or 45-second mark, you introduce yourself. You talk about who you are, why you're doing this, and the app in question as well. So it kind of puts into context. It kind of like brings people in. And if you're like takes them back up a bit, just kind of explain why you are doing and what you're doing and what you're getting out of this. And then it goes back into the topic as well. And I really like that. So
that's awesome. Okay, good to hear. Yeah, please take that.
Nice. In a lot of your video thumbnails, you have your picture, then you have text that kind of goes behind your head. How do you do that? Because I thought it was actually very clever.
Yeah. So I use for the thumbnails, I actually use Canva to do the thumbnail editing, and Canva has like a bunch of, on the pro plan, they have some like AI features, which for me, most of the time the AI features are like not that useful. But for this one, they do have a really good background removal tool. And so all I have to do is just like take the thumbnail, like right click, background remove. And it's just so smart that it somehow like just keeps me in the frame and then removes everything in the background. Sometimes it keeps also elements that I didn't intend to keep it, but it works out perfectly, like a cup or like something else. And it's been great because then if I just duplicate it, like duplicate the layer, remove the background, then I just put the text in between, the duplicated layer in the background, it gives the illusion of the text is behind me. And it's like, because of the Canva Pro, it takes 4 seconds. There's just like one click and it's just kind of done. And so that's how I would do it. Originally, I was doing it in Figma, and I was like removing the background with another tool. But yeah, Canva just made it so much easier for me to do that.
I have to try that because the approach I use right now is like I use the Apple Photos app, the same on the
Okay.
iPhone basically.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know press and hold on like let's say the primary character yourself in this case. It
Mhm.
separates you out from the background basically, and
Yeah.
so I use Figma. I have the first shot, then I copy and paste just the version of myself from photos, paste it into Figma as well. Now I have a different layer, and now I add the text behind it. Very similar to what you're doing, but
Yeah,
definitely a bit more manual. So I should try out
yeah,
the Canva approach on this one.
yeah. You should definitely check out Canva. I've been very surprised by how just like how powerful some of the stuff is, and I think it's also one of those things, kind of like auto captioning, where maybe a few years ago I would have been like, oh, I really want to like learn Photoshop or really get into Figma to make these and craft it in a specific way. But now I'm like, no, I want to use their templates. I want to use their fonts. Like, let me get this out of the way, because they actually have really good, like they have really good templates and graphics just out of the box for you to make thumbnails. Because a lot of people do use it for thumbnails. So that's been, it's been so nice to just kind of offload some of that stuff, which I would usually just piece together with Figma and something else.
Yeah, I should give it a shot. I've also been trying Adobe Express. I have an Adobe subscription, and so I've just been like trying out all the tools they have there. And they also have similar tools there, but I haven't tried out in the last like let's say 6 months. I should see if that also has it because
Yeah, I think it
right
might.
now I realize like I'm paying a lot in subscriptions to a lot of different things for one-off activities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm doing the exact same thing right now. Canva's probably like that one, and then I think maybe CapCut. I think technically, because I mean I do it like twice a month, but these are very like one-off things that which it just makes my life a little bit easier, where I'm like, okay, I can pay like $10 for this. Like, I think that'll be worth the time.
You know, absolutely. One of the things I've also been hearing is that posting long form videos directly on Twitter or X has been really popular for a lot of developers and individuals. I noticed in your case, you know, you have your tweet and then you put a screenshot of the video itself in the first video. You don't have a link going outside because the algorithm probably penalizes you. And the follow-up response, you have the link to the actual source itself. Have you tried putting the videos directly on Twitter and seeing if that gives you more views or more results?
No, I haven't, but I think I probably should. I think what I might do is post it first on YouTube, so I know people that really want to watch it go watch it there. And the reason that I care more that people watch it on YouTube than on Twitter is I really want the algorithm to have more data points of the type of audience that's watching this. And so if they watch it on Twitter then and they don't watch it on YouTube, then YouTube won't be able to pick up that audience characteristic. And the people that are willing to go move to YouTube and watch it, they're 100% the type of audience that I want YouTube to learn about. So that's why I care more about that. But I think what I will do though is probably post it on YouTube, and then I might just repost it on Twitter like a few days later or something. So that way I know, okay, people have probably already seen it and I'm not going to tweet about it anymore. So this is probably a good time for me to just post it here. I am really curious because I do think that they bias towards video and they do boost it a little bit in the algorithm. Like every time I post a screenshot tweet, I do notice there's a huge difference versus if it's just a plain text tweet versus a screenshot tweet. So, but I've never done a long form video tweet. So I think I might do that at the next one, to be honest, and see.
Yeah, definitely give it a shot because when I've done like experiments on it and I posted the full 30-minute, 20-minute video on Twitter, both in the vertical form as well as the long form form, the videos got like 10 times, 20 times more views than on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like, it's very surprising, but I don't do it enough. Same reason as you. Mostly, I have a different reason in many ways because I don't want my content to live in any one location where if it ever goes away, it's just gone forever. And so I like to keep it as a central source of truth. And in my case, I also embed the videos on my blog itself. So for me, like people actually using YouTube is less interesting to me than people who actually visit the blog and then happen to have the video as part of the text-based content below it. And the way I embed the videos means that the tracking on YouTube doesn't happen as well. So if you view the if you view my video on group.com, that view count does not count towards YouTube because I use a no cookies, light version of YouTube, which is basically, because if you just use a native YouTube embed, it's like 800 kilobytes, 1 megabyte of stuff that gets downloaded as a part of it. I use a light YouTube script created by, I think, one of the developers, at Google who optimizes for web technology things. And it's like like 10K. And
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, I'd rather have it be 10K
Yeah.
and the views aren't being tracked than adding me like 1 megabyte and then having it like, the views count for it.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point it'd probably be like, the YouTube algorithm is going to penalize me because the view count is low because I'm not sending people to YouTube directly. I'm sending people to my blog where I'm viewing it itself. And that's the part that I always have this like tension between is like, how much of my content do I have it living permanently in some other source versus it always being funneled through to my own blog or my own form of what area they own essentially.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. That's not something I've thought about too heavily, to be honest. But it's probably something because I do want to spin up like a landing page because a lot of people have been like asking, hey, do you do like where like do you have a newsletter? Do you do stuff like do you have a central like blog or something that I can follow? And that's been something I'm kind of been interested in. And if I do that, one of the things I wanted to do was have a place where people can see all the videos and I can categorize them a little bit easier. So I might run into the same problem probably in a few weeks, I think.
Yeah. One thing to try out would be like having a small blog post for each video itself where you actually in text form describe what's happening, just so you get more of the indexing from Google search and the SEO that comes along with it.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good, especially for my type of content. I feel like where it's really educational and like long, it would probably it would be, honestly be very useful for people to be able to see it in that written format. And then, for indexing purposes, that would probably do well SEO wise, I think.
But the challenge, of course, is that the more we go deeper into it, the more it becomes a full-time job in its own way. To like actually, it's like you create content for half the time, and the other half you spend on marketing, which is probably the right balance for it. But I'm guessing you're a one-person shop, and so it's not like you can spend time, on one thing and then be like, okay, now I'm going to flip a switch and then have my brain have all the energy and creative capabilities at this very moment to now go into marketing mode and creative mode.
Yeah, it's a little harder to be able to do that here, just as like a one person team. But what I've been trying to do right now, especially since I have to swap between, honestly, just in general, I have to swap between development, customer success, being able to answer emails, then marketing and like specific marketing that's not really the content, and then the content marketing. I have been having to train myself to kind of turn off like part of the brain and then like swap into that mode and then try to focus, just because I realized I was having a hard time like kind of doing like a little bit of both each time. I realized I have to kind of dedicate, which is also why my videos frequency decreased. It's still pretty good because it's like every 2 weeks, but my goal was actually like I'm going to do one YouTube video a week, which in hindsight I'm like, why did I think that was possible? But that was what I wanted to do, but I realized I did have to compromise a little bit and start like putting a little bit more focus in each thing to be able to do it correctly. So that's something I'm still trying to figure out too, is just how to balance all of this and in the most effective way. And I don't think I'll ever figure it out. I think it's just going to be a constant like evolution.
So for like, let's say a 10-minute video, end to end, how long does it take for you to come up with the concept, the script, recording it, and then hitting publish?
It's definitely different per video depending, but in general, what I've seen, and I'm getting a lot faster at this, I think it takes for a typical video, probably, I think like 6 to 7 hours total, most likely for an entire video. And this is like a 9 to 10 minute video by the end of it. But now I've gotten it down where it's an hour or less of just shooting the content. Before it was like 3 hours of footage, and then my editing would take so long. Then the editing takes the longest time. So it's like an hour of shooting, and then editing and chopping really takes me like probably 6 hours to be able to do in total. And the reason it takes so long is because I think I just have to keep rewatching it over and over again. And like all I do is basically just rewatch it, throw things out, rewatch it, throw things out, rewatch it, throw things out. Then when I'm really happy with it, then I can go ahead and add like the graphics, the text, the accompanying stuff, which then that one takes me about like 1 to 2 hours. So maybe like 4 hours of just raw stripping away until I'm like, okay, I think I've got literally the exact things that I wanted to convey in here and nothing more. And now I can go ahead and just do the overlaying and everything like that. But yeah, probably, so I guess like maybe 8 hours on average to make a full video.
In some of the videos where you actually have the camera facing the screen and showing parts of your app's UI itself, are the voiceovers done in real time, or do you do the voiceovers afterwards, after you've done all the edits?
Oh, they're done in real time. So when I'm pointing the camera, those ones I'm actually talking, and I think I'm still using the same mic, because I just wanted to keep the volume level like around the same. And so yeah, those ones are like there. There was one or two times where I did actually do an actual voiceover, and it's probably at a time when as I'm editing it, I'm like, oh, that actually didn't make any sense. Oh, I have some leeway here. Maybe I can re-record this and no one will notice. So maybe there was like one or two times where I was able to re-record things, but most of the time it's like when I treat it almost like it's facing me and I have no choice but to like keep it in there. So I do the voiceover like while I'm actually pointing it at the camera.
But it does make editing it more tricky because you're speaking and then the visuals might be different than the voice you're currently speaking, which means if you cut it in the middle, you're mid-sentence of your previous point, but the visuals have already shifted over.
Yeah. And that's happened so many times where I think I've had to throw out entire things because I'm like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like this is not going to work. Like the visuals are so off. Maybe there was also one time where I was able to swap the visuals with something else. There was a video too. I think it might have been this hackathon video I did where I was building the LE attachments feature. I could not get the overlay to work at all. So I had to record a whole new thing the next day and just kind of like swap it in and be like, yeah, it turns out this didn't work. And it looks like it's like a whole other thing, but it actually worked out very well. So I had to study some other YouTubers and see how do they do it, especially ones where they're just kind of talking at a camera or they're doing multi-day long things. How did they do it in a way where I didn't even notice this was happening over multiple days? And so I learned some techniques on how to like swap in things that don't make any sense or from completely different time segments, and then go back to the current time period and make it seem natural. So that was something I did have to do in one of the videos.
Was it a deliberate decision by you to actually have the camera point towards the screen as opposed to just doing a screen capture itself from your machine?
Yeah, that was deliberate because I did try a bunch of things, especially on, it was interesting because one of my first TikTok videos I did, I wanted to share something on the screen and I actually recorded the screen and then put it in the TikTok video. And then for some reason, when I played it back, I was like, this just doesn't feel natural. Like for some reason, but then it made sense because it was on TikTok and you don't really typically see that. On TikTok, usually people just point their phone at something like at the screen and it's more natural. And I realized there is actually a huge difference between the two. The bias, I think for me, and I think probably for most developers too, is just, do the screen recording because people can see it clearly. But for some reason, recording the screen versus pointing your camera at it actually just conveys completely different things. I think that one is so much more polished and clear that I think that's great for like if I'm going to record here's how I use my app video, I'll probably do it that way because I do actually want it to feel a little bit more polished. I do want them to see every element. But if it's just me recording the screen, I think it conveys to the viewer, hey, this is supposed to be very casual, or like, oh, we're actually in the moment of me building this. Like this is actually this is not a polished thing. Like this is a very raw look into how he's coding. And I think both of those do convey different things, even if the content is exactly the same in theory. So yeah, it was a deliberate decision to like record the screen like with the camera instead of doing a screen recording.
Wow, that's very cool. I feel like there's nothing further we can talk about your video recording this. I think we really touched upon like almost every topic.
Yeah, we did.
Is there anything about the videos or anything you want to just like highlight that I may not have covered?
I think just the impact that video content has had just for me too. I've been trying to get everyone I know to start making video content. You're the exception because you already do it, so I don't even have to try to convince you to do it. But I've been so surprised by just how positively the videos have been received and the kind of connection that I've built with the audience that I have through video, which I don't think you can get through any other medium. Like I've done Twitter, I've written a couple of blog posts before in the past, but there's just something different about especially a long form video that you just cannot get in any other content. So the only thing I would say is if anyone's thinking about doing it, 100% go do it. And then if you want to start, definitely start small, like maybe something on TikTok where the risk is low. Actually, I love TikTok because I didn't have an audience there, so I felt less self-conscious posting on there. But even Twitter, like I was self-conscious posting video on Twitter because I'm like, I kind of know some of these people now, like this is kind of awkward. So that would be just something I would share is that piece of advice. Like start really small, actually try to post in a place where you don't really know anyone, so you kind of get out of your own head, and then you can ramp up and start gradually trying to increase it to something like YouTube where you share it with people that you actually know. So that's just one thing I wanted to touch on.
No, very cool. And then, shifting gears a little bit to your Twitter content itself, where I see a lot of the content you post. I love the before and after screenshots you often post of like, here's a small tweak I'm making. Like, I think I saw recently you had one where here's the menu expanding with an animation and without an animation. And these are nice because it touches on several audiences. One is just usability people who are like, oh, this is much better because it guides your eye appropriately. Yeah. And then you have people like me who just love animation in general. So I'm like, oh, I'm curious to see how it is actually done. And then in some of your comments, there's a technical audience which is like, how did you make the expanding behavior work where it expands, but the checkboxes also animate in at the right time so it doesn't look, it feels natural, because animating expansions are always tricky because you're redrawing the entire screen. So when do you do the redraw? When do you paste your new content in? And I love those discussions that I often end up seeing on your threads.
I think that's also why I love posting this kind of content too, is because I can tell people genuinely it does actually spark some interest or discussion. And one of the things that I'm also hope that people do is when they see this kind of stuff, they're like, I need this in my app, or like, I need to figure out how he did this and I need to bring this here. And which is great, because then I think people are doing that when they do ask questions like that, like, how did you do it? Because I know they're asking so they can do something similar, which is really good. Like, that's like what I want. But yeah, it's been really fun posting those before and afters, and a lot of them are for me to be able to see, like, because I already know one thing I'm going to do in a few months is go back to that and be like, man, I can't believe it didn't animate like that in the past. Like, man, remember when it was so static? And I love being able to go back and see that before and after just for myself.
Which is a common hook as well in other videos. If you look at some of these marketing articles, they're like, people like seeing the progression of something, even if they're directly using it. So it's a great way of doing it. But then again, the other angle also is the genuineness of it. You mentioned like video form is getting a lot of traffic, and you get people to talk to you more about it. It's because in many ways they are at a moment in time seeing a snapshot into your own life. And I think the camera pointing at the screen adds that realism, because it's the way I described it is to someone else who asked the exact same question to me about when do you do the camera facing the screen versus when you're just doing a actual screen recording. The example I often give is like, imagine doing a nature documentary in your backyard. If you want to show something that's happening there, it's probably better for you to just take your camera, point at what you're trying to show, as opposed to going to like high-res 4K footage of what you're trying to show outside the context of what you're trying to do here. There's a moment in time for those kind of activities, but probably not for what you're trying to do here if you're trying to show something that's very genuine. I love watching the Apple keynotes because they're just like really well done. Like, half the products there I don't really relate to, but I'm like, the transitions between where they go from like, here's a real world example of someone like walking by on the screen, to then going to the actual live content from the slides or whatever they're trying to show there. I thought it was also a good touch as well, because you kind of take the reader or the viewer from a world where they're seeing the person talking, then the camera zooms all the way out. You're now seeing like basically, I think like wherever they're recording it in like California, you're seeing that it's almost like a bird's eye view of the entire geography. It zooms back in, you see the person, then you're suddenly into a higher res version of the PowerPoint presentation, or in their case, keynote, of course. The keynote presentation. And I always liked that transition as well. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, if I had more time and skills, maybe I should learn Premiere or After Effects. That would be something I'd totally consider doing.
That's interesting. I need to go back and watch because like, you're right. I didn't realize that was happening, but they do it so seamlessly where like, it's not jarring, like, which is, I'm like, that's very hard to pull off. Now that I've been doing some video stuff, being able to go from that to a whole other like point of view like that is very challenging. So I bet so much thought went into how they were going to do that and not make it feel jarring. So that's interesting.
Another interesting point you brought up as well. Now that you are doing more video editing and you see some of these things, do you ever watch TV shows or movies and so on and go like, wow, that was a great shot. That was done really well. I don't know how they did it, but that was really cool.
Yeah, I do. Now I have been doing that all the time. Like when I see things, I'm like, I don't want to imagine the work that went into like doing this, or like something I've been noticing a ton is just how many cuts there are in things.
Yes.
That's something where as I was watching, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was Breaking Bad or something. I was like, I think the camera just cut like 40 times in this 1 minute. And I'm like, that is so crazy how and the different angles that they have. I'm just so surprised now that I did something I didn't notice, which again, if you don't notice it too, that means that they did such a good job where like it felt so natural. And I have been like definitely subconsciously picking up on this stuff now, and then trying to apply some of it my own, like to my own videos too. Like how can I also do something similar here where the transition doesn't feel as weird, or I can take something from the movie. But yeah, I think that's something naturally that just happens. Yeah, when you do that.
Yeah, in my video, I think I talked about in the last time we talked as well, is that my goal is to do everything in one take. So I do not do multiple takes. So if there's any mistakes there, it's staying in the video. And so if you ever look at the camera, the shots that I'm doing, it's just one continuous take, which is easy because I'm just really sitting here and I don't really memorize my lines. I just add a little bit as it goes on, which you can always tell is like, okay, this guy's just winging it at this point. It's like way off script. And whenever I watch some of the movies, especially some of the more East Asian films, like action movies specifically, like I think I watched The Raid recently, and The Raid is like, it's a great film. And there's like this massive scene where it's like a fighting scene, this like, apartment complex. The entire thing is like maybe 5-6 minutes long for one particular sequence. The camera never cut anywhere. It's like one gigantic live action shot. I'm just sitting there going like, how in the world did they pull that off? Because it was seamless. Like if they had any transitions, I did not notice it.
Yeah, I don't know how. I have not seen anything that does that, so I might go check that out too. Because I'm just so impressive. I think there was another movie too. I forgot what it was, where they did most of the things in one shot. Like, or maybe I'm misunderstanding what it was, because like that doesn't seem possible at all. But they did a lot of things in like either one take or one shot, or the scenes were all in one go. Which now, knowing what I know, like it's so impressive that people can pull that kind of stuff off.
Yep. And also when you know that there were multiple shots taken, and like let's say it's like a rain sequence in like an action movie or something like that, you're like, okay, for every shot they basically had to refill that water tower with the actual grid of fake rain thing on and above it, and probably get everyone to like wear dry clothes back from their wet clothes. You kind of start having an appreciation for how much time it takes. And you often read about actors going like, shooting started at 4 a.m. and we didn't end until midnight, and we got like maybe 5 minutes of content. I'm like, yep, I can totally see why it was almost, 20, 18 hours of recording and only 5 minutes of content came out, because resetting the context to where it needs to be, especially if it's not trivial, that's a lot of time.
A lot. Yeah, it is a lot. And then other things too, like lighting. Like I didn't realize that time of day matters. So now I also understand why some directors are like, no, we must shoot this right now. And like, I was like, oh, they could just use lights, like just go film it on like a green screen or a backdrop. No, the natural light, I realize, makes a huge difference. So like, and you only have like a finite amount of that each day, and you have to pay a whole crew. So yeah, I think we have it easier than a lot of people, but I have a lot of appreciation now, way more appreciation for film and for a lot of other things now that I started doing this.
Especially when you have multiple actors who have to coordinate their lines and make all these things work, because if one person forgot their lines or made some mistake that was like as they're walking and doing something, for example, the whole thing has to be done over again. Whereas in our cases, just you and I just on the screen, just once. If anything happens, it's like, it's just me. But in this case, I always look at it in terms of like probabilities. And if everything has like a 50% chance of working correctly, with each thing you add that's like a point of focus, whether it's like a prop or an actor or something like that, you're multiplying it by like smaller and smaller numbers at the point where it's like there's like a 1% chance that end to end this is all going to work well if everything lines up. And those are the odds you're literally working with.
Yeah, this is why directors are so stressed all the time. This is why they get like so frustrated, I think, whenever something doesn't happen or one person messes up the line or something. Like I think this makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah. So last question. There's a lot of content you see, especially on TikTok, where it's just AI generated. There actually is no person. It's just like the faceless, I think they call it faceless videos or something like that, where you just have a script, an AI generated thing creates the background, creates the voiceover and everything like that. And some of those have been very, very popular. Like I follow a handful of historical videos, like, like ancient Rome history and like things like that. And almost all of them follow very similar format. It's just a panoramic view of some like, classic photo from that era, a voiceover, captions flying in and out, interesting music of like battle sequence or something like that. And that's it. Have you considered that for some of your videos to kind of just have like auto-generated things?
I think maybe some of the backgrounds and some of the B-roll. To be honest, it's a little harder, I think, to match the aesthetic that I go for. But 100%, if there is a tool or if there is something that can get like really good B-roll footage or something that's auto-generated, I will 100% do it if it adds to the story or it helps like keep the viewer engaged, especially I'm always looking for something like, since I'm talking for 12 minutes straight, anything to make this interesting, I will 100% do it. Probably wouldn't do like the faceless part or like the auto-generated talking, but the background, yeah, if I would love, I'm honestly looking forward to the day when we can get a lot of that stuff auto-generated, even graphics. Like I think some of the graphics that I've had done in CapCut are auto-generated, like AI generated in CapCut, because they do have some of those features. And so yeah, I'm very open to doing it. I think when done well, it adds to it. When done poorly, you can also tell too, like when it's done poorly.
Cool. Chris, I think this is fantastic chatting with you about all these things. Link to your apps will be in the description in whatever format you're currently watching or listening on. Is there any parting words that you want to share about in general about app building and all of that?
Yeah, just definitely follow along if you're interested in building. I'm filming building productivity apps on my YouTube channel and everywhere else on Twitter. And if you ever have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty open about responding to people. If you comment on my videos, I will respond to the comments. So definitely feel free to just reach out anytime if anyone's listening.
Perfect. Chris, thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks so much, Krupa. Thanks for having me.